Welcome to our launch event for our initiative to transform Alzheimer's disease and related dementias research and care through our new core digital clinical measures. We are so glad that you're here today with all of us for this session. We have a lot to get through today, and it's going to be exciting stuff with some opening remarks and a background on what we've done with a fireside chat with our guests here today. Our care partners of people with Alzheimer's disease, and some panel discussions with our experts from our team. Before we get into it, we do have to do some housekeeping. We're recording today's session. You'll be able to get the recording and the slides after the session. If you have any questions, just pop them in the chat box. We'll be monitoring it, and if we can get into them, we'd love to. Please do not transcribe this webinar. A lot of you probably know DIME already. We, as you'll see today, we convene stakeholders to take some of the most complex issues in the field. And I think Alzheimer's disease related dementias research counts as a complex area, as we'll be talking about. We always try to advance the safe, effective, and equitable use of digital approaches to redefine healthcare and improve lives. We want better health powered by digital innovation. And for that reason, we got together a whole group of experts in this field, as you can see on the screen here. And why? Why did we try and come up with a core set of digital measures for Alzheimer's disease and related dementias? There are 47 million people worldwide with these conditions, and it's growing. Treatment options are at a breakthrough point. They're now happening, and we need to be able to understand aspects of life that are meaningful for patients and their care partners, not just for treatment, but also for care. What's more, research needs diversity as well. And we need tools that help us increase that diversity, especially for underrepresented populations. We embarked on this as our entire group here to define a set of measures that are broadly relevant across the ADRD spectrum and across disease groups and across the world, so we can reach out to those populations who need it. This research is so that these measures are so that research and care becomes more patient-centric, and our research becomes more comparable across the world. And I hope that you see the work that's gone into it and the value that comes out of using these measures through our talk today. We'll start by going through a bit of the background on how we got to where our core measures before we introduce our core measures and the resources that will help you to adopt them. We started this work with a systematic literature review of ADRD articles, and we recovered over 2,000 articles, but we screened this down to 24 qualitative articles to really understand the experience. We ended up with 10 symptom groups of things that are important to patients, their care partners, and clinicians, and six impacts of those symptoms as well. We took that and developed an international study that we'll talk a bit about, with over 1,000 patients in 6 countries in the world across 14 sites. It was a very big undertaking for this group. But from that, we were able to look at the patient, care partner, and physician perspective about the real core and important things that matter to them. And we also tried to look into the literature and the available landscape of technologies to see what technologies could be used for this purpose. And we've added to our library 84 different technologies with lots of evidence supporting those technologies. We used all of this with a Delphi panel with 20 of our experts over 3 different rounds of review to come to our core digital measures of ADRD. Going into each of our pieces of research, this is a lot of information on the screen. You're not expected to read this, but from our systematic review, we came up with a lot of areas that can be measured, that are important to people with ADRD and their care partners and physicians. Our job at this point is saying which are the core, which are the ones that rise to the meaningful aspects of health and day-to-day life, and what can be measured through digital technology. So we had to take this and go back to patients and their care partners, all stakeholders, and we put together a mixed method study across the world where we presented areas from our systematic review, and we asked participants which aspects they would like to see improve in their condition, which ones they not want to see worsen. We had qualitative and quantitative elements of this, and we saw things like performing activities of daily life, living life independently. These were all very cognition-based elements of life, and communication really rise to the top in quantitative work. There was a bit of a difference with healthcare professionals seeing essential bodily functions as well being very, very important. And then from our qualitative work, we saw other patterns emerge as well. Things like sleep and elements of mobility really rise to prominence in this group. We can't just say what's important without a way to measure it. So we went into the landscape and we tried to find what technologies are out there so we can take these measures and implement them now. And we've updated this this library that we've put together that's available on our website just last month, and there are 84 different technologies with 125 pieces of evidence so far. You can go into our website, you can filter by broadly by Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, or look more specifically to a part of the spectrum. There are also plenty of other conditions and condition agnostic evidence there too. But you can see from this that there are a lot of options out there for measuring in ADRD right now. All of this information that we put together was taken by our Delphi panel. We had one-to-one interviews over 3 rounds, a very intense 3-week period, if we think back at it, with our ADRD partner experts. And we had to talk to them about, you know, what is out there, what measures have mature digital technologies to be able to measure them. What measures can be explainable and what have importance to patients and their care partners, what has clinical relevance, which of these measures, if we were to develop them, cover the spectrum of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And what we landed on were four that can be used together or in isolation depending on study or clinical needs. And we tried to put these into groups from what patients were telling us and their care partners were telling us from that research. We found that visual spatial memory, or in patient terms, remembering where things are through digital active tasks, are important. Expressive communication, being able to be fluent in your speech and be able to find words at the right time. Getting to sleep and staying asleep was a very big issue, not just for patients themselves, but also for the people around them, their families and their loved ones. And what we're calling non-sedentary behavior, but it comes down to keeping active and staying mobile. We've had reports of people saying, like, if the people I love can just stay active, I stay an active part of their relationship and I can be present in their lives and it relieves that care burden for me. So these are all very, very, very important aspects of life. And what we have done is developed ontologies and terminologies, aspects on our website that you'll be able to get to, link in the chat now, that show you what you need to do to be able to enact these and operationalize these in practice. But it doesn't just stop there. We have to also, we've also put together as a group a set of resources that will be able to help you when you're using these. From the research point of view, it's great to be able to have a conceptual model of these digital measures so that you can see where they came from and how to measure them and use this in your work. And graphics like these can be taken from our website and used in your work to show how we build up from specific health experiences, quotes from patients, into meaningful aspects of health, concepts of interest, and how you measure these concepts too. But there's more as well. And explore our website, you'll be able to see that there are tools there to help you select and evidence the technologies you use to implement these measures in our library of digital health technologies, as we touched on. We have access, you'll have access through our website to our mixed method study data. There's a huge number of patient quotes in there, and you'll be able to reanalyze it to your specific needs as well. And you can plan and report. We have discussion guides to help you talk to your internal teams about how to use these measures, or talk to your patients about how to use these measures with them. Conceptual models, as we just saw, and template text to help you fill out things like protocols and proposals and describe the background and information of these measures. There's a lot of resources there. And now I'd like to go over to our panelists and discussionists to really talk about the impact these will have. We have a very we have a very big group of panels today, 4 panels in total, and we would like to start with our care partner guests here, Colleen and Isaac. And I'm going to stop sharing screen now so we can all be on the screen together. Great, I've got that. And I'd like to welcome you both here. It's great to have you here, and you two are really both in a position of being able to care for a parent with Alzheimer's disease. Can you tell us a bit about the people you care for and yourselves and the journey you're on at the moment? Isaac, would you like to start?
Sure. Good day or good evening, everyone. My name is Isaac O'Neill. I'm originally from Newark, New Jersey. From there, I moved to Washington, D.C., where I attended Howard University for undergraduate. From there, I matriculated to Howard University's College of Medicine for medical school, and then took a break in between, went to American University for my MBA, and then came back and finished my last year of medical school. During my last year is when my mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and she was forced to retire early. So she was at home by herself. She was able to function on her own at this point in time. But what we didn't know was that she was forgetting to take her hypertensive medications. And so during that period, she ended up having a transient ischemic attack, or a mini stroke, basically. And she declined very quickly. And so once she was eventually released from the hospital, um, she was getting to the point where her memory was extremely bad, was waking up not knowing who my father was, and was becoming agitated. So at that point, we had to hire a caretaker. I was still living in DC at the time, and decided to move back as my dad was still working full time. So I put my residency plans on hold, moved back home. The first caretaker that we had, her and my mom did not get along at all. So that was very short lived. And so I was primary caretaker within that time frame as we were looking for another one. And the one we have for her currently works very well with my mom. However, she doesn't drive, and English is not her first language. And so when it comes to interacting with doctors and physicians for appointments, I have to be there to not only drive them, but also interact with them as well. So 4 years later, here I am still helping out at home.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Isaac. And Colleen, would you like to share about you and your father?
Hi, I'm Colleen. Thank you so much for inviting me to come. I'm a mom of three. I live in Chicago, and I'm a clinical social worker. I have my own private practice. My dad was a former doctor, and he retired 2 years ago. He's 72 years old. And we found out he had Alzheimer's disease 2 years ago, but the symptoms started before that. He actually diagnosed himself. He began to start noticing some things. That's why he retired early. But my dad was an amazing person who spent all of his life trying to improve his patients' quality of life. And when he wasn't doing that, he was volunteering and traveling overseas. So yeah, he is our family hero, and but it's been a rough road.
And yeah, this all comes back to the core of this, right? Quality of life. It's a big factor in like looking for treatment options and clinical decision making and your lives. And we've designed these core measures for exactly this reason. Can you tell us a bit about like your quality of life and how you manage this both for yourself and for your parents? Maybe Colleen, you can start us off there.
So my quality of life is okay. It's been a lot more stressful with my dad's diagnosis, and a lot more sad because there's this feeling of helplessness. Like, what can we do? What can we do? My dad's quality of life, currently, he's had a lot of anxiety. That's been one of the biggest kind of things that is impacting his quality of life. And I wasn't aware of his sleep schedule. I had just assumed he was sleeping all the time. And I'd spent the night over at his house because I had to take him to an early doctor's appointment. And I discovered he was up multiple times in the middle of the night, and then up again early in the morning. And I know that sleep impacts quality of life. I just didn't know he wasn't sleeping. And so then it made sense why his anxiety was even worse. And I was able to communicate that with his doctor and then get some med changes done. But yeah, sleep for my dad, it impacts quality of life, his anxiety. He loses things a lot. And that seems to be a daily struggle, is where's my phone? Where's my wallet? And it's so distressing to him. So, just trying to figure out ways that we can help improve his quality of life, I think, is always the most important.
Yeah, and as you saw, like these measures that we've come up with, they're from patients, and they come down to the level that you're talking about right now, don't they? It's just being able to track and know about these things for your loved ones. Isaac, how about you?
Sure. So my mother was a social worker prior to having to retire. And so she was on the child study team and was used to interacting with kids. And so with her, especially with her quality of life, I feel like it's a lot more restricted just due to the places that we can take her, because she loves interacting with children, as was her role professionally for, you know, 30 or so years. And so she's still used to that. And she was also a pretty well-known figure within the community. So a lot of times she thinks she knows people's children and she doesn't actually know them. And so, you know, she'll go to console them or interact with them. And these are strangers most of the time. And, you know, luckily it hasn't gotten to the point where we've had any parents react adversely, but, you know, unfortunately, it's probably only a matter of time before that situation arises. So we have to be very cautious about where we take her. She was an only child, so my mom kind of marches to the beat of her own drum. And so kind of keeping her from doing what she wants to do is definitely tough on her. And that's something that she does realize. But it's just unfortunately the reality at this point. For my father, I'm sure that, you know, with her being here physically, but, you know, not in the same state that he's used to, I'm sure he envisioned a different life after retirement for himself. But he's still working, and I think he's still working to really just give him kind of a break from being at home all day and having to deal with that. But it is stressful for him, as well as our caretaker has off on the weekends. Otherwise, she lives with my parents. And so it's to the point where she will wander off on her own. So he's a physician and is a medical director. And so very intense week. And so when he gets home on the weekends, he can't lay down without having to worry about her walking outside and getting lost. And so that's definitely a struggle for him. And then for me, I just feel like my life has been on hold for the past 4 years, just trying to figure out what our next steps are. And I've had a lot of supportive friends that have offered to, you know, do things even as simple as call Ubers for my mom's appointments. But, you know, I still unfortunately have to be present. So, you know, and my brother is also on the West Coast, and so he's doesn't have as much of a role. But as the older child, I feel like, you know, this is my job. So.
Thanks. And when we were talking before, you said about your mother's like a really educated person, and one of the first things, other than the medicine, was like just not being able to like find the words, and the frustration with that as well.
Correct. And, you know, something that she was cognizant of early on in the disease process. But at this point, you know, she can't even put her hands on a word as simple as ice cream or flowers. But at this point, she doesn't really notice that she's not able to identify what certain things are. So, a lot of tangential speech that, you know, happens with conversations with her. So.
Well, thanks for sharing. We're going to round it up with just a minute more before we move on to our next panel. We wanted to talk a bit about digital measures and them being new, and we have access to this frequent self-monitoring. It wasn't like something we did until recently. How will the ability to like self-monitor you or your family members like impact your life, Colleen?
So yeah, self-monitoring is amazing that we have the opportunity to do that. My dad has the APO4 gene, and so me and my siblings got tested, and I have the APO4 gene, and it gives me a sense of like, gosh, maybe I have a little bit I can do to try to prevent it, or just to assess, like, is it something happening? Is there a change? Is there a difference? Because my dad didn't get that chance, even though he kind of knew it, but something that's like something real that he could use. So yes, I will use anything and everything that I can to prevent and to monitor.
And Isaac, I think you said you hadn't been recommended stuff like this, but it was something that you would look into.
Most definitely, yes. I haven't had any outside of during medical school when my mom first got diagnosed. They did offer testing, but it was so early in my mom's disease process, I didn't think I needed it at the time. But with my sleep disturbances and, sometimes my speech is not as fluent as I want it to be. So, it's good having the tools to be able to kind of track as we go along different measures to, see what the overall outcomes are and hopefully monitor the disease process a bit better.
Thank you so much for sharing this and really like grounding where the science of measure development like impacts real life. It's been great talking to you. I'm sure our participants have really appreciated hearing your story. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next panel session now. And this is why digital measurement makes a clinical difference. I'd like to invite, I've lost my screen. I'd like to invite our speakers to the stage now to come onto camera. We should have Anne and Alex, Anne from Eli Lilly and Alex from Key Elements. Great, lovely. So thanks for joining us. The first question I've got for you is, in the work we conduct together, I touched on this a little bit earlier, we saw that healthcare providers have a little bit of a different assessment what matters to people with ADRD themselves and their care partners. Where do you think this disparity comes from, and how do you think a core set of digital measures can help us address it? I'm going to ask you, Anne, first to conquer that one. You're muted.
Always has to be that one person. Okay, thanks, Piper. I think this is a really good question, and I'm not sure it's really a difference in opinion of what matters to the patient and the caregiver, but maybe just a different focus in terms of, what should be focused on for treatment or monitoring and things like that. And I think they really complement each other, right? Because the clinician is an expert in the disease process, but the patient and the caregiver are the expert in the patient. And I think those two things really match together nicely so that people can form a partnership and kind of chart out a course of what's going to happen. And of course, the patient and the care partner and their family members are especially focused on and aware of what's going on right now and what matters in particular to the patient and their family. Whereas a clinician may be more familiar just with sort of in general what tends to happen to people with the disease process or side effects from medications, and they're sort of looking towards the future of what to expect. So they're just coming at it from a different angle, and I think they kind of complement each other nicely.
Alex, would you like to build on that?
Yeah, sure. So I would totally agree with what was said, but I also think it's a very short amount of time a clinician sees a patient. It's a snapshot, and that snapshot matters a lot. What is written down later in the report, what has been said or transferred to the medical doctor, to the neurologist, and also what plays into a diagnosis. So unfortunately, you don't see what happens at home. You just see what's in the clinic. And the clinic is a really, I would say, unnatural, artificial space where people don't like to go. They are stressed. And usually, I see that myself in the clinic. They are so stressed and so worried that the test is almost not possible to, administer. So you sometimes have to ask people to come back, get a good night's sleep, rest well. But yeah, it's understandable why you're so stressed. So I think that is also part of why what we see as clinicians in the clinic is not always matching up with what caregivers and patients say to themselves. And then, I think it's good to work together. The good thing in the clinic is, it's objective, it's tests that are normed, and you can kind of put a patient, you can situate a patient where he is, for example, in his cognitive performance. But what is really mattering is what happens at home. Can I still make my coffee? Can I still do a bank transfer? Can I still go out and do grocery shopping, you know? And this is unfortunately still something that we are really missing out when we're doing our clinical assessment in the clinic. But yeah, now the nice transition here with digital tools, I think we can fill that gap. We can see what happens in between those snapshots.
And
It's kind of funny because sometimes these reports conflict with each other. And so when patients come into the appointment, you do the MOCA on them or something like that, and I'm asking them, well, how are you doing? I'm asking the care partner, how are they doing? And they're asking me, well, what was their MOCA score? And I'm like, well, it was 2 points better, but if you're telling me they're worse, you know? And so you have to kind of put all those things into perspective.
Yeah. Also, when the patient leaves the room, makes a big difference what the caregiver sometimes says as well. So it's complex.
And I guess that having this option for like measuring outside of the home, like you say, it complements that, right? Because you're getting that information. And thinking about it, how can these like measures help in the identification of these immediate needs? This idea that life happens at home. Anne?
So I think there's several advantages to measuring things because you can sort of decide together what it is that's important to measure. And then also you can measure continuously or frequently over time, and then complement that with the patient and caregiver report so that then you're not subjected to what we call immediacy bias. So, you know, if all of a sudden there was a new behavior that happened yesterday, then of course that's going to be the thing that is foremost on their mind. And it may totally knock out the fact, oh, they've been having this horrible diarrhea from their medicine, and you may never get to address it. So I think it helps you kind of keep track of all the different things that you're trying to address and make sure that you don't miss anything.
Alex, what do you think about the continuous assessment of health in this context?
Well, yeah, it's missing the gap, and it can probably help you predicting, or let's say detect changes earlier, which is key here, you know. When you go just every year to a clinic, a lot of things can happen within a year. If you do while you're at home or frequently, let's say some cognitive testing, some monitoring of yourself, and you notice decline, you can act much faster. And that's what we want to detect when there is a decline, when there's a delta in your scoring, and then you go in much faster, and then should prioritize also how fast you come back to the clinic. So I think that is very important, and also objectifying maybe a subjective, let's say, impression you have, or the patient sounds better, he sounds less good, you know, for example, speech fluency. It's something that we subjectively maybe capture, but we can measure this, we can give a value with this, and we can trace this in this way also, which I think makes subjective impression objective. And that is quite important if you want to, you know, act and make decisions based on that.
And this takes us really nicely to this last point I wanted to bring in, which is like the screening funnel, right? Like how people get from that initial idea of, is something wrong, to how do I get help? And I think it's this idea of how do these fit into that screening funnel? How do they help you prioritize who needs help and when? Alex, would you like to start with this one?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a little bit more from the primary care or secondary care experience I have, because I used to work in a memory clinic, and I see that at the moment we are overflooded with patients and participants. They all want to come and see a neurologist, and they want to see a neuropsychologist. They were tested, and it's very hard to prioritize. Now we're starting with a sort of little algorithm on the phone call level, try to kind of prioritize, stratify people based on what they say. But I think there could be some testing, it could be done some monitoring, something with digital tools at home that will then later on help. Okay, this person has to be seen way earlier, or this one is, let's say, for example, already quite advanced. So, you know, can be seen a bit later. So this time window that is now really important also for treatments, those people have to be captured. And at the moment, I don't know how it is maybe in other countries, but everybody calls in and everybody gets somewhere an appointment from now in 6 months, and there are a lot of people that should be seen earlier get lost. And I think there I see a very good use case or application in that funnel to prioritize, stratify, however you call it, the patients or people that are calling in with a concern. At the same thing on the primary care level as well. You see just a normal GP. Also, there he should make the decision, am I referring or not? Based on what? I mean, maybe, MMSE, but maybe some home tracking, monitoring over time will probably, I would say, enforce a decision if this person should be referred faster or maybe a bit later in time.
And like before we have to round this up as well, it's all well and good about people who know they need to be seen, right?
Mhm.
But what about those who don't realize they need clinical care? I know you've got some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll second that this is a huge opportunity, especially now that it's become urgent that there are treatments available that have to be delivered in a timely fashion. But there's also opportunity for just sort of more general screening to make people aware. It's like, oh, there might be something going on and I should go see the doctor. So, some of these things that are maybe like gamified apps or things that are like retinal scans that can be part of your yearly eye exam, or there's so many things out there that are like huge opportunities right now that could really bring it to people's attention. And then if we have ways to prioritize people that need to come in, as Alex said, I think it's going to be really useful.
Yeah, there's such great opportunities for using these to really help patients who need it most when they need it. So thank you both very much for this panel. We're going to move on to a related topic now, which is the importance of this out of the lab ADRD measurement and ADRD assessment. So I'd like to invite our panelists for this session to come join us. There we go. We've got Brian Murphy from Cumulus Neuroscience, Chris Edgar from Codscape, Emmanuel Striel from Altoida, and Ricardo Fertez from ESI. I always get that one wrong. Please, always pronounce the E a bit French, I think. So yeah, thank you all for joining us on this session as well. And here we're really thinking about this idea of assessment out of the lab and measurement outside the lab can really help with sort of quicker diagnosis in an earlier stage. And how do you think that these measurements fit into this screening funnel as we talked a bit about just then? Let's follow on that conversation and try and relieve some of that pressure from the diagnostic system. Ricardo, did you want to come in here?
Yeah, thank you, Piper, and thank you for inviting me. Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I would like to reflect upon is the history of diagnosis. I remember when I was a medical student 30 years ago in Barcelona, and the diagnosis was made post-mortem in autopsies, and it was just a confirmatory diagnosis. Then we moved on to look at biomarkers in CSF and neuroimaging. And at that point, those biomarkers were also confirmatory. And later, we've moved on to try and establish the same biomarkers in blood. But what started being confirmatory, researchers very quickly realized that they could track the progression of the disease if they look closer enough. So we have started developing predictive tests based on CSF and blood. And I think the next step is the digital biomarkers. Those will allow us to predict the individual risk for somebody to suffer from the disease. And why is this important? Well, it is crucial. I mean, we know that Alzheimer's disease has a lot of environmental factors that contribute to the risk. In fact, there are 14 different environmental factors that are modifiable through lifestyle changes, things like sleep, diet, exercise, hypertension, bangs to the head, etc. So there is potential for diagnosis to become an intervention before the actual cognitive symptoms appear. And I think that's the place where the digital biomarkers is taking us.
Lovely. Chris, would you like to come in next?
Yeah, no, I think to elaborate on some of the points that Anne and Alex had already made, I see the promise of these tools really as being their ability to create a far more integrated health ecosystem, that we have the opportunity, if we can move outside of the laboratory and traditional in-clinic settings, to help raise brain health awareness, help create funnels into clinical trial screening, but also, as Ricardo was saying, to more continuously track people throughout their health journey. And that can include clinical trials and real world evidence generation. And we know with the traditional approaches that we just don't have the numbers of neurologists and neuropsychologists that we need to do this kind of work in the traditional way. And that problem is clear for us in the US and Europe, but even more acute in other countries. And we saw in recent World Dementia Council meetings that for some African nations, they might only have 2 neurologists for populations of several millions within the country. And so this is really critical to a large scale, comprehensive and also equitable approach to brain health awareness and people's access to treatment.
Thanks, Chris. Brian, I know you had some points on this as well, and maybe Emmanuel, you can come in after.
Sure, yeah, exactly. So I think there's a lot of overlap between the comments we're going up here and with previous session, Alexandra and Anne. We talked there about countries outside the rich world, and that's certainly interesting. I think there may be larger chances for early adoption there because there's not an existing infrastructure of assessments and of processes and of standard of care and clinicians, as you said, Chris, as well, to displace, so people may be more open to them. But I think that's even if we come back to the richer world as well, where many clinical trials are run, and that is obviously kind of a focus for us in the nearer term, so that we can develop therapies that can be global in the future. And even in parts of the United States, you may be in Cambridge, Massachusetts, you may be in San Francisco, you may be in San Diego, you may be lucky, or you may be somewhere else where there are effectively medical deserts. We were talking about this the other day, Emmanuel, where people are underserved and where there is no PET scanner nearby, there is no skilled neuropsychologist. And these people need to be, if we want to have therapies and drugs or other therapies which are going to be effective across different ethnicities and different social groups, we need to access these people who are not all right in front of where scientists happen to work and clinical specialists happen to live.
Yeah, and go on, Emmanuel. I was going to say, just like this idea of this, like taking it out of the lab and where people live. I know you had some stuff to say on that.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, this is very important, but I would like first to thank Isaac and Colleen for reminding us why we are here. And it's very fresh memory for me. And I really relate when Isaac said his life is on hold. And, from a clinical point of view, wherever you are, either you're in a place when there are a lot of medical support or else, you ended up just working with people with cognitive problem, and you see them once a year, and you ask them, how have you been? How did you sleep? And when you know that these people have naturally episodic memory problem, short-term memory, so it is literally that. You need to look at the data. You need to be able to have a measure. In a case just you measure your sleep, you don't even have to ask. You look at the data, you just realize, like Colleen was mentioning, that immediately there is a sleep pattern which is not normal. And also this is about the continuous measures. So you can be remote, you can have data, continuous measure, and you see a movie instead of a picture. And that's why also we can bring an additional value moving forward. And wherever you are, people can have access to the technology because you wear it, if it's a wearable.
Kind of like taking it outside this time limited and place limited structure, right? And expanding that. I don't know if any of the others want to build on this before we get on to some of the challenges we have with this continuous data as well. I want to build on that idea of time limited, breaking out time limited and location limited structure.
Yeah, maybe really briefly, when we're doing clinic-based assessments, the slice of time that you have to work with is very limited. And that probably limits, obviously, it limits the time of day people can be tested at. And it might be a big variation between how people are functional in the morning, the middle of the day, in the evening. Also, just the number of domains or modalities or functions that can be tested is also limited. So by having that extra time, you could spend one day a week looking at sleep, another day looking at episodic memory, another day visual memory, another day executive function, another day language, and distribute that assessment load over the week and get both more kind of spectrum of understanding of their condition as well as more temporal resolution.
I think there's an important and quite specific measurement issue there as well. And what patient-reported outcomes, of course, have allowed us to do is to ask about both severity and frequency of signs and symptoms of diseases and conditions. But with performance-based measures, the task performance of cognitive tests or motor function tests, we've been restricted to that kind of snapshot, and that inevitably means that we haven't been able to measure what is the frequency of symptoms, and this is in conditions which are naturally fluctuating. So some of them very markedly so. If we think about dementia with Lewy bodies or Parkinson's disease dementia, clinical fluctuation in symptoms is a core feature of the disease, and it's been very difficult to measure that with the existing approaches. And so this idea of continuous or high frequency assessment could be a really important one specifically for this kind of area.
And to build on that a little, for all the panelists, I think, I know, Chris, you got a point, but everyone can jump in here. There are upsides to this continuous measurement, right? But it's not, and this use of digital measurement, and it's not all upsides as well. We have to be very careful and considerate about how we employ these. Chris, do you want to start us off on thinking around this?
Sure. So I mean, I think what we've been discussing is this idea that digital tools can potentially improve some of the methods by which we're able to collect data, and higher frequency assessment is certainly one of those. And there are a number of potential upsides there. One being potential increases in the reliability of assessment, that we're able to deal with some of this fluctuation in performance and have more reliable measures. And we've certainly seen evidence from a number of the burst assessment approaches that things like test-retest reliability can be improved by being able to aggregate across multiple assessments. And then in addition, there's this idea of improved ecological validity, that we're much more closely reflecting the participants' experiences in daily life, how things are for them when they're performing their activities of daily living. I think there's huge potential upside there, but also, this is evidence that we need to generate for the tools. This isn't a given. We don't immediately know that we're going to improve these things, that we're going to increase reliability or ecological validity. We do need to collect the evidence to demonstrate that. And I think an associated challenge is the problem of missing data, and whether missingness is truly at random. And certainly I've seen examples of studies where missing data can be an issue at the participant level, and we need to be really concerned about not just the idea that we're always reducing burden and lowering barriers, but that we can create barriers for some participants, and we need to understand how to support people in order to successfully conduct this kind of assessment. And then additionally, there's the problem of whether data are truly missing at random or not, and we have to think carefully about collection of data to help us understand whether data truly are missing at random. And that can be a challenge for remote at-home type settings, because of course diseases and conditions themselves, as well as treatments, could potentially influence whether data are missing or not. So there's definitely a lot of evidence gathering that needs to be conducted here to make sure that we truly come out with fit for purpose assessments.
Yeah, and I sorry, but just to build on that, Chris, I think that's absolutely right. And we know that these continuous measures provide a lot more information than the cross-sectional time points that we traditionally have had with the patients. And digital biomarkers are the only ones that offer that kind of promise. You cannot have continuous MRI, you cannot have continuous CSF and blood testing, but you could have some sort of invisible guardian angel tech that will monitor you and alert you and your clinicians when your health starts to deteriorate. Of course, we're not there yet. I mean, we are a long way from being there, but I think the potential is there for all of us to be continuously monitored without noticing that somebody is actually looking at our health as we go along on our daily business.
As well, just really briefly, if this is going to work, we have to work really hard to make that technologies easy to use. Not only easy to use, I've seen the Q&A, people talking about consumer grade, but even pleasant or enjoyable to use or engaging. So we've used gamification as one strategy to make people want to do repeated cognitive assessment. And when they do it, not only are they willingly do it, but they're really trying. They're actually pushing themselves, challenging themselves. If people are just kind of going through the motions, you may not get a valid measurement. Whereas if people are pushing themselves and really trying day in, day out at different times of the day, then you get that ecological validity that you can get nowhere else.
Yeah, and I
Daniel,
just
would you like
want
to
just
wind
to
this
add
up?
yeah, I just want a little thing also. We talk about the generation. I mean, a lot of people who have Alzheimer today were never really exposed to technology. I mean, or very late in their life. And now we're working, and then we have the chance to start working with people in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, who have been exposed to this technology way earlier. And the adoption, while it has been a barrier and people are, not tech savvy or, reluctant to use technology. No, we have a generation of people who were born with it. And for them, it's just like part of their daily life. And I think in the future, while it has been a barrier, is naturally changing and moving forward in the right direction.
Thank you all so much. There have been some questions coming in the Q&A in the background as we've been talking. We have to move on to our next panel now, but if you would like to jump in and type an answer to some of our questions in the Q&A, that would be wonderful. Thank you all so much for these insights. I'm sure our audience appreciated it. We're going to move on to our last session of the day now. And this session is about the use of technology in ADRD clinical research. We're going to talk about the importance of patient-centric measures per the Patient-Focused Drug Development Initiative. And I'd like to invite Annie Saha and Alex Atkins to come join us on the stage here and start us off by thinking about broadly what are the benefits of digital health measures of ADRD in clinical research and clinical trials. Annie, would you like to start us off, and then we'll go over to Alex?
Sure. I think it really echoes a lot of what we've already heard from the previous panels of the ability to better measure how people are doing in their day-to-day lives and be able to capture all of those different aspects rather than just one piece of a person's journey through, whatever disease or condition. Obviously, in this case, we're talking about Alzheimer's and related dementia, and be able to capture those different pieces of information using different bits of technology, whether it's using digital health technologies, patient-reported outcomes, other activities, and work like this, where you're able to sort of pull together in a pre-competitive consortia to at least get some of the basic things that we recognize are important to both patients, to care partners, to clinicians, and really bringing all those different groups together to really understand, like, these are the things that you need to be thinking about. And maybe not everything fits in every trial, but you've at least put together some of the sort of core or important aspects that are important to people that can be measured in, whatever specific individual development program. And that at least there's a base level of research that's been done by through sort of the pre-competitive consortia work.
Thanks. Alex, feel free to jump in here.
Yeah, I think one of the main benefits we can yield from digital measures is access. And this was mentioned also before, in terms of making sure that assessment of symptoms or cognition and function can be delivered to people. We don't want to leave people behind as we develop treatments. And that's really critical. So we have to move away from these specialty sites being the only people who are able to evaluate people, both in the US and outside of, developing countries. This is really critical. We don't have the infrastructure to do the kind of testing. So it's not about waiting 6 months. There's nothing even to wait for. So that's really a really big benefit I see. And that's particularly true as we head earlier and earlier into the disease. And this becomes a prevention space and a chronic disease space where we really we have a lot more people coming through that filter who need attention. And so I think this is really a big step towards access and equitable treatment of individuals.
Yeah, exactly. I think on both parts, it's like having that basis to know where we're building from and then spreading it out. And that's exactly where this work came from, that idea of this equitable healthcare. So when we're in research, we're always striving for really like lean clinical trials, right? Trying to make these efficient machines, but that means there are barriers. And what barriers are there to including digital tools and digital measures such as ones we've produced into trials, and how can we overcome them? Alex, would you like to start us off there?
Sure. I mean, I think that keeping randomized clinical trials lean is really important. I mean, we heard from our caregivers. I was also a caregiver for my mom throughout her struggle with dementia. And, we really owe it to them to make sure that what we put in our trials is there for a reason. And so that said, we really do need to expand to make sure that we include these exploratory endpoints when possible. And I think one of the barriers there is that there's so many. There's just a proliferation of digital tools. So it's like, well, we need to make sure that we're selecting something that really is has potential to be meaningful, and it's not just busy work or something we're asking people to do without a real rationale. So I think that we're starting to align, and things like this consortium where you're actually talking about measures that are based in patient-focused drug development that really have a real they're based on a concept that's important to patients and caregivers. That's really a really great step forward to making that. But also, we don't have to rely on clinical trials completely for these either. So that's a great thing too.
Thanks. And Anya, I know you've had some discussions on this as well. Did you want to pitch in?
Yeah, I know. I hear a lot that FDA sometimes we're the barrier. People are scared to incorporate some of these endpoints and trials. And I want to dispel that up front. We are absolutely open, and we do want to see these types of data. And, the first thing I would actually say is come talk to us early as you're thinking about incorporating, DHTs, digitally derived endpoints, and these types of measures in your clinical trial when you're starting at the exploratory phase, when you're even working in pre-competitive consortia, when you're thinking through, what is the rationale? Why are you doing this? Because, to Alex's point, we don't want people to just do digital for the sake of digital. Like, you have to have a good reason of how it's actually going to impact and improve a person's care, or be able to better understand, the outcome of a therapeutic or, medical product of some sort. And the earlier that you come talk to us, it actually starts to give us more confidence, because we can start to look at the data. It'll help the review teams better understand what's being done, why you're trying to do that. And it gives us sort of an opportunity to educate and work through some of those things ourselves, so we can also give you all better advice, so that we can all work together to try to advance treatments. And, I know we've heard anecdotally, like through the Decentralized Trials Research Alliance did a survey. And, one of the things they heard was that the digital health teams would say, hey, let's incorporate this. And the clinical teams and regulatory teams and companies would say no. So also, if there's work we can do even internally within companies and groups of like, how do we break down some of these silos? Because we really truly do want to see this.
And we're trying to move towards that, like all over the place. Everyone's trying to move towards that. As part of this project, we have each of our measures has a discussion guide that helps to like lubricate those conversations a bit, to get people thinking on the same page and talking about the importance of this. We're going to have to round up this chat, but I will ask one more thing you may be able to give some quick insight into here. And it's about evidence. We're talking about evidence inside clinical trial, but there's lots of evidence we can generate outside of RCTs as well. Where do these measures fit into things like real world studies, and what benefit do they bring? Alex, would you like to start us off there, and then we'll go straight to Annie?
Yeah, just briefly, I think that digital tools just have an extreme advantage for use in real world evidence, and over longer periods of time, over more diverse individuals, relating the performance on the or the metrics developed from the digital tools to real world health, health outcomes and medical records. So they really have the potential to have this real world validation that is harder with some of the clinical instruments we use in trials. So getting the relationship between performance over time and those medical interventions that become required, costs. I just think there's a huge potential there. And if we can get them in trials as well, we can really get a bridge between, performance, the clinical trial populations, the real world evidence populations. And I think that's just a huge advantage for these over some of them. It can actually maybe speed up that kind of validation and use in real world.
Annie, would you like to round us off for today before we go into our closing remarks?
Yeah, I think just to sort of echo onto that, the ability to be able to collect data real world or through other outside the clinical trials, I think is going to be incredibly important for evidence generation. And we need to, develop systems and work collaboratively of like, how do we actually leverage that and incorporate that? And then also, with that, we also want to make sure we're not leaving people behind, thinking about, rural communities, people who maybe don't have internet or, wireless access, people, and that's just not rural communities, it could be in, an inner city or anywhere. And, how do we make sure we design those studies, whether it's real world evidence studies or clinical trials where people have access and that they can actually use these technologies to benefit their care.
Thank you both so much, and thank you to all of our panelists. I will be handing over to our CEO, Jen Goldstack, in just a moment to round us out with her final thoughts. I do just want to bring up the slides here for a second, just to invite you to all to a launch that may be interested in this stuff about validating novel digital clinical measures. You can join us to find out more, but it gives you the tools you need to understand this validation process. And you've seen the importance of the work we're doing here today. So if we go to the next slide, we'd like to invite you to reach out to us to join in other work as it may interest you or the teams that you work with. One of them is pediatric rare disease, so we can define core digital measures in this space. And our other project we'd like to invite you to find out more about driving market access for diabetes management. Please reach out to us if you want any information on any of these important things, or if it might interest someone in your teams that you work with as well. Jen, you have 2 minutes to round us out. Please take the stage.
Fantastic, Pip. Thanks so much. I can get through these things quickly, so we'll finish on time. The most important thing I need to do is to thank every single member of this project team who has worked so incredibly hard over the last year or so. It's interesting. This is a longer timeline than is typical for a DIME sort of sprint initiative, but the commitment of and the tenacity of every single one of you who worked on this project team, and in particular, your dedication to making sure we heard not only from clinicians and care partners and patients themselves who were able to share their voice, but that we did this work globally, that we went to a globally representative population, and we didn't just talk about the fact that so little of what we know about Alzheimer's disease and related dementias is just a snapshot of a subset of the population. We actually did something about it. And what's interesting is I'm able to sort of reflect on how things have changed over the course of a longer project. We've seen new therapies approved in Alzheimer's and around dementias at a rate we've never seen before. And as Annie said, we've got receipts on how open our regulatory colleagues are to really sort of learning about high quality, relevant digital health technologies and their value in medical product development. The DHT guidance has been finalized. The decentralized clinical trial guidance has been finalized. And while this is all incredibly exciting, and while I'm incredibly proud of the work this team has done, there's lots that hasn't changed, right? Payers and HTAs are still insisting on high quality patient-centered evidence before they make a pricing and reimbursement decision. We still don't have enough clinicians to care for every person with Alzheimer's or dementia needs for them. And even where we do have those clinicians, they are maldistributed with the patients who need them the most. Right? The devastation that accompanies an Alzheimer's diagnosis hasn't changed. And the hard work, the exhaustion, the burden, the heartache of caring for someone with Alzheimer's has not changed. And so as we reflect on the work that this team has done, right, that we've thought about the value that accompanies a digitally derived measure, they can be more relevant to patients in an objective way than we've ever been able to capture data. The quality can be there because it's a much more holistic view into the lived experience of the patient and their care partner. And most importantly, and as we've discussed today, we now have these longitudinal high resolution data sets that are going to be so much more rich when it comes to asking questions about what is this patient experiencing? Can we identify some phenotypes that are actually going to be more responsive to certain treatment pathways? And is this drug actually working in this patient? Finding out quickly to the benefit of the patients we're all here to care for, and trying to create a commercially viable pathway to continue to invest in this critically important therapeutic area. And so as we reflect on the work that's been done, again, thank you and congratulations to every member of the project team. And the time now is not to sit back and relax, it's to lean in. We have identified what is most important to measure about the lived experience of a patient and a person with Alzheimer's disease or a related dementia. We have ensured that the technology is available today where we are making these recommendations. Let's move. Our regulatory colleagues are ready to hear from us. They're ready to receive this evidence. Let's build these tools. Let's start incorporating these tools. Let's put them into registries, to clinical trials, to routine care, to deeply understand them and to improve the way we care for every single person who's received an Alzheimer's diagnosis. So congratulations, thank you. And the work really starts here. Pip, back to you.
I just wanted to thank all of our participants today, all of our project team. Hard work's gone. The participants took part in all of our mixed method work across the world and everyone that made it happen. And I look forward to the next steps that we go from here. Watch this space. There will be multiple next steps coming out from us and other like-minded individuals. And we look forward to getting your interest in it and working with you. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.